That smudge turned out to be a brand new comet heading our way that we're now calling Comet R2 Swan. But Swan isn't arriving alone.
At first, astronomers thought it was nothing, just a smudge. A flicker of glare on the edge of a deep space image. They adjusted the filters, recalibrated the lens, and prepared to delete the file. But then, the light moved. Not drifting aimlessly like dust or debris, but shifting with precision. That was the night Comet Swan entered the record books, and possibly human history. The discovery came quietly. On September 11, 2025, an automated observatory in the southern hemisphere picked up a glowing object cutting through the dark at impossible brightness. It wasn't just another icy traveler from the outer system. Its trajectory didn't match anything in NASA's catalog, and its movement, too steady, too deliberate, made even veteran astronomers stop and stare. They named it C-2025 R2 Swan, after the telescope network that first spotted it. But that name, elegant and harmless, would soon feel like a cruel understatement, because Swan wasn't behaving like a comet at all. Its light didn't flicker or fade as it spun through space. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Every few minutes, a rhythmic flare cut through the void, bright enough to outshine neighboring stars. At first, scientists assumed it was some kind of reflection error, but when independent observatories in Chile, Japan, and Hawaii confirmed the same readings, the chatter began. Something was off. Swan's course wasn't constant. It was changing, subtly, slowly, but unmistakably, like it was adjusting itself. That simple discovery flipped everything we thought we knew about comets. Because space rocks don't correct their path. They don't pulse in patterns. And they definitely don't move as if they're watching something. Yet Swan did. And when the data was compared across observatories, the truth hit even harder. The object wasn't alone. Something else, moving just as strangely, was heading in the same direction. In astronomy, brightness tells a story. The brighter an object appears, the closer or more energetic it usually is. But Swan's glow didn't make sense. Even at hundreds of millions of miles away, its luminosity rivaled near-Earth asteroids, almost as if it was generating light, not reflecting it. Then came the second hit. Just 12 days later, another observatory picked up a near-identical signal, only this one was trailing behind Swan by several million kilometers. It pulsed too. Same rhythm, same intervals. Like two heartbeats perfectly synced across the void. The odds of that happening naturally? Astronomers called it impossible. Soon, data from around the world poured in. From the European Southern Observatory, the Hubble archives, even amateur astronomers using backyard telescopes. And all of it told the same unsettling story. Swan wasn't unique. It had twins. Scientists began calling them the pair. Two comet-like bodies, identical in trajectory, locked in what looked like an intentional formation. But no natural object had ever moved like that. No comet, no asteroid, no satellite. The motion looked programmed, like something under control. Still, official reports stayed cautious. NASA and ESA both released calm, neutral statements. Unusual orbital behavior, they called it. Possible optical interference. But behind the scenes, internal memos painted a very different picture. Some researchers privately questioned if they were looking at an artificial object, and that was when the data spiked again. The pulses, which had been faint and rhythmic, suddenly intensified, doubling in brightness in less than 6 hours. Every telescope pointed at the sky that night captured the same thing. The twin light flaring together, then dimming as one, as if sending a synchronized signal. But if this was a message, who or what was it meant for? At first, the pulses from Swan and its twins seemed harmless, cosmic quirk. But as weeks passed, researchers noticed something strange. The rhythm wasn't random. It repeated in sets of 12, separated by short pauses, then restarted. That pattern matched nothing seen in natural space phenomena. An intern at the Beijing Astronomical Center was the first to notice it. When he plotted the light frequencies on a graph, the signal formed a perfect repeating structure, a digital-like sequence. He thought it was a coincidence until he compared it with the twin
twin objects pulse. They were identical, down to the microsecond. By late October, the global science community was quietly obsessed. Teams in Germany, Japan, and California ran simulations for weeks, trying to explain the readings as solar reflections, gas bursts, or electromagnetic interference. None of it fit. The pulses were too clean. No natural noise, no decay, no randomness. Then one analyst at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory made a chilling observation. When he slowed the signal's intervals by a factor of 64, the pattern matched binary code, ones and zeros repeating in deliberate clusters. The translation was incomplete, but the first deciphered sequence spelled out a single English word, echo. That's when panic set in. The discovery was buried in internal channels, flagged, classified until further review. But a leak from within the European Space Agency revealed fragments of the same data online. Within hours, it spread across social media. Hashtags like Echo Signal and Swan Object flooded feeds, sparking chaos. Governments scrambled to contain the story. Press releases denied everything, claiming the binary match was a coincidental artifact. But deep in observatories around the world, scientists kept watching, and the pulse kept repeating. 12 bursts. Pause. 12 more. Every time, the message was the same. Echo. And that's when the second part of the transmission began. On November 3rd, every major telescope tracking Swan received a sudden surge in interference. Screens flickered, instruments froze, and deep space monitors briefly went offline. When systems came back up, the feed showed something new. The pulse had changed. It was no longer a simple burst of light. It now carried frequency modulation, like a carrier wave used in radio communication. But this wasn't broadcasting outward. It was coming in. At first, the signal was barely detectable, hidden in the static of the cosmic background. Then, one receiver in Australia picked up a narrowband tone that seemed to align perfectly with the Swan object's last known coordinates, a tone that shouldn't exist in nature. When the data was filtered and slowed, researchers noticed faint fluctuations repeating every 17 seconds, too structured to be random noise. When plotted visually, it revealed something no one expected, a waveform that looked eerily like a human voice print. But here's the part that sent chills through the control room. The waveform wasn't recorded from a microphone. It was reconstructed mathematically from light. In other words, something billions of kilometers away was encoding sound into light. The decoded output was fragmented, distorted beyond recognition, but there were syllables, faint, mechanical, stretched across the static. Analysts from MIT and Tokyo University worked around the clock trying to clean the noise. After 3 days of processing, one phrase emerged, garbled but unmistakable. Do you hear it now? That's when NASA ordered all private observatories to stop tracking the object. The official reason? Interference with radio spectrum data. The real reason? No one knew. If the message was just a reflection, or if someone or something was finally talking back. And then, before they could analyze further, Swan changed direction.
Objects in space don't just turn. Their paths are governed by gravity, not choice. But on November 9th, the Swan pair broke that rule. Overnight, both objects shifted trajectory, a clean, deliberate curve, steering away from their projected path around Jupiter and angling inward toward the Sun and toward Earth. It wasn't subtle. The change was so abrupt that dozens of observatories thought their tracking software had glitched. But the recalculations all said the same thing. The Swan pair had executed a maneuver, something no natural object could ever do. Within hours, emergency meetings were held across NASA, ESA, and China's National Space Administration. The classified reports later leaked under the codename Project Ecliptica. The data confirmed what many feared. Swan wasn't being pulled by anything. It was guiding itself. The media caught wind quickly. Headlines exploded. Comet defies physics. Twin lights changing course. Alien technology or optical trick. Official spokespeople dismissed it as data misinterpretation. But behind closed doors, internal memos described a growing fear that Swan's deceleration and rotation patterns looked eerily similar to controlled thrust. For the next 6 days, the objects continued their slow pivot, adjusting at precise intervals. Then, on November 15th, they stopped, perfectly
aligned in geosynchronous motion relative to Earth. For a brief moment, their pulses went silent. Every major observatory on the planet watched in stunned silence as the light from both objects dimmed and then simultaneously flared again, this time not toward space, but downward toward Earth. It wasn't just light. Ground-based instruments picked up faint electromagnetic interference, localized across specific longitudes, almost as if the signal was now scanning the planet. The question no one could answer: were we being observed or measured?
November 18th began like any other night for the teams monitoring Swan. Both objects were still visible, faint but steady, hanging like twin embers above the southern horizon. Then, just past midnight UTC, something changed. First, the telemetry feed from Chile went black. Within seconds, data links from Japan, Italy, and Arizona followed. It wasn't just the telescopes. Satellites started to drop offline too. Global Star, Iridium, even fragments of the Starlink network all reported mass synchronization errors. For almost 2 minutes, the world's orbital systems flickered like dying lights. Then, silence. When visual feeds returned, the Swan pair were gone. Not faded, gone. Their coordinates showed empty sky, as if the objects had simply erased themselves from existence. Astronomers searched the region for any sign of debris or reflection, but there was nothing. No heat signature, no residual glow, no trace. At 0211 UTC, reports came flooding in from pilots across the Pacific. Several claimed to see, quote, brief flashes, blue-white bursts cutting through cloud cover, moving in perfect formation. One pilot described it as, quote, a spotlight from above scanning the sea. By dawn, the world was divided. Some believed the objects had burned up or disintegrated. Others insisted they'd only turned off, like lights waiting to come back on. Then, 40 hours later, ground-based radar stations in Siberia and Greenland detected 2 high-altitude anomalies hovering at the edge of the atmosphere, motionless, cold, reflecting no sunlight. No one could confirm what they were. No official statement came from any government. But leaked air traffic control logs revealed restricted airspace zones forming across 5 continents, all centered on one silent directive: do not engage, do not illuminate. And that was when the first photograph surfaced, one that would ignite panic around the globe.
The image appeared online just after midnight. A single frame posted to a private astronomy forum under the username DeepSignal88. Within minutes, it was deleted, but not before screenshots spread across the web. At first glance, it looked like a blurry telescope capture, 2 faint shapes against the black of space. But when analysts enhanced the photo, the truth hit like a shockwave. The objects weren't spherical like comets. They had edges, straight, angular, metallic edges. The enhanced image revealed massive geometric symmetry, long panels, lattice-like structures, and something resembling an open aperture at the center. The larger of the two seemed to be casting a faint beam toward Earth, too faint for the naked eye, but visible through infrared filters. It wasn't dust, it wasn't ice. Whatever Swan was, it had architecture. Governments moved fast. Within hours, NASA issued a takedown notice for all mirrors of the image, citing national security concerns. The European Space Agency followed, denying any connection to the leak. But once something hits the internet, it never truly disappears. Independent experts, astrophotographers, engineers, even former defense analysts began dissecting the frame. Some compared the object's shape to old orbital mirror designs. Others said it looked like a massive listening array. But one pattern kept showing up: the same sequence of 12 lights arranged in perfect symmetry along the structure's surface. The same 12 that pulsed the word echo. For days, every major network ran the story, calling it the greatest astronomical hoax of the decade. But behind the noise, more photos leaked, this time from defense satellites, showing the same shapes, same position, same impossible precision. And then, the beam that had been invisible turned on. A focused column of white light pierced the upper atmosphere over the Indian Ocean for exactly 4 minutes before vanishing again. The world now had proof, but no one had an explanation. For 72 hours, the world waited. Every telescope, every radar dish, every deep space antenna was aimed at the same spot in the sky. Governments denied it. News anchors downplayed it. But the data was undeniable. The beam from the Swan pair wasn't random. It carried information. When the light hit Earth's atmosphere, sensors across 5 continents recorded a surge of gamma and radio overlap, an impossible hybrid signature. At first, scientists thought it was interference. But when they combined the recordings from multiple observatories, a coherent pattern began to emerge. It wasn't just light, it was language. Encoded in the intensity shifts was a sequence: short, long, short, repeating in sets of 12. When translated through binary and frequency mapping, the signal resolved into audible sound. A voice, calm, monotone, artificial. First phrase translated cleanly: "This is not the first time." Then silence. The team at the European Space Research Center replayed the data 100 times, convinced it was a trick of harmonics. But the voice continued, each repetition clearer than before. The next sentence sent a chill through the room. "We watched you build what we left behind." And then, as if responding to their disbelief, the light intensified one final time. A burst so bright it overwhelmed every sensor on Earth. When it faded, both Swan objects were gone. No debris, no trace. The sky returned to normal. But not everything did. Hidden within that final burst was a compressed data packet, encrypted in a format no one recognized. When decrypted weeks later, it revealed coordinates, not in space, but on Earth, deep in the South Pacific. Location with no landmass, no islands, just endless dark water. And yet, every 12 hours since that day, satellites still record a faint pulse from those exact coordinates. 12 bursts, pause, 12 more. The same pattern, the same word. At first, scientists believed the strange rhythmic bursts from Swan were localized, mere echoes of its own radiation bleeding through space. But then, something unexpected began to happen. Across the planet, instruments that had no connection to astronomy started reacting in perfect unison. It began quietly in Chile, where magnetometers at the Atacama Observatory picked up faint harmonic pulses, each one arriving exactly 43 seconds apart. Within hours, identical readings appeared in Antarctica, Japan, and northern Canada. The pattern was unmistakable. Swan's emissions were no longer confined to space. The signal was resonating through Earth's magnetic field itself. At first, the data looked like interference, perhaps a solar flare or stray electromagnetic noise. But when teams compared timestamps, they realized every pulse matched the exact millisecond of Swan's light fluctuations recorded by the James Webb Telescope. It wasn't random, it was synchronized. Then came the anomalies. Power grids began registering microscopic fluctuations, tiny, rapid dips in voltage, too precise to be natural. Fiber optic networks around the world logged bursts of static that repeated the same spectral rhythm, 4 tones, then silence. The sequence was identical to Swan's light pattern recorded weeks earlier. Some called it coincidence, others called it communication. By the time news reached NASA's Deep Space Network, similar signals were emerging from beneath the oceans. Submarine sensors, devices designed to listen for tectonic activity, were suddenly detecting electromagnetic spikes rising from the deep, not descending into it. It was as if the planet's crust was answering back. Global agencies tried to downplay it, labeling the phenomenon geomagnetic interference. But inside classified channels, a new term appeared: Resonance Phase 1. Under secrecy, a joint task force formed between NASA, ESA, and the Chinese National Space Agency. Their mission was simple: track the pulses, trace their origin, and determine whether Swan was causing them or responding to them. The deeper they looked, the stranger it became. The pulses weren't just repeating, they were evolving. Each cycle grew fractionally shorter, as though counting down. When the intervals reached 37 seconds, radio observatories noticed something even more bizarre. The pulses no longer traveled outward evenly. They were bending, redirecting toward specific coordinates across the globe.
At first glance, the coordinates meant nothing: remote deserts, mountain ranges, stretches of ocean. But when analysts overlaid them on an ancient map of Earth's geomagnetic nodes, every single point lined up perfectly with regions of high magnetic concentration. Places like Giza, Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines, and the frozen plains of Antarctica. The realization sent a chill through the scientific community. These were the same locations once rumored to align with astronomical bodies thousands of years ago. Now, they were lighting up again, one by one. Civilians began noticing side effects. Compasses spawned aimlessly, migratory birds altered their flight paths overnight, GPS systems briefly lost calibration. Something beneath the surface was shifting, responding to an external rhythm humanity couldn't yet decode. At 2:17 UTC on October 29th, the network monitoring SWAN's emissions registered a spike unlike anything before. For exactly 7 seconds, the planet's magnetic field vibrated in perfect resonance with the comet's pulse, forming what scientists described as a global standing wave, a harmonic echo encircling the Earth from pole to pole. During those 7 seconds, seismographs recorded no earthquakes, no volcanic tremors, only a low, continuous hum, a tone that could be heard in recording from the upper atmosphere. The frequency measured 8.7 Hz, barely within human hearing range, and yet pilots flying over the Pacific reported feeling it through their instruments. Then, as suddenly as it began, the signal stopped. Complete silence. For 12 hours, no new data arrived from SWAN. The James Webb spectrographs went dark. The Deep Space Network reported temporary loss of telemetry from several satellites. Even the Voyager probes, now billions of miles away, fell quiet. It was as if the universe itself had taken a breath. But at 14:33 UTC on October 29th, the silence broke. A final pulse erupted, not toward Earth, but outward, past the sun, as if acknowledging something unseen. Every observatory on the planet captured the same blinding flare. In its spectrum was a code, one repeating phrase, translated through